Evet, şimdi yeme içme trendlerini belirleyen unsurları konuşacağız. Bu konuyu aslında bizimle iki değerli konuşmacı konuşuyor olacak. Biri İspanya'dan gelen arkadaşımız Beatriz sektörden, bir tanesi de Matteo. Matteo da İtalya'dan geliyor. Matteo Vignoli Future Food Institute'un kurucularından. Beatriz de İspanya'da KMZero gıdanın geleceği için çalışan bu enstitünün, bu oluşumun yöneticisi. Bugün bizlerle bu konu hakkında gerçekten çok kıymetli şeyler paylaşacaklar. İzninizle onları sahneye davet edeceğim. İlk önce Beatriz gelecek, daha sonra Beatriz'e Matteo eşlik ediyor olacak. Beatriz, please, I'm inviting you here for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Do you hear me? Yes? Hello, good afternoon. I hope Merve said many wonderful things I could not understand, but I want to give a big thank you to Funda and Merve. This is my second time in Istanbul, also for a Dude Table conference, so thank you, because this is always a wonderful experience. So I'm here to talk to you about the future of food. And we are going to play a small game, because I know you might be tired after lunch. So a very quick game. Please close your eyes for me and just imagine what the future of food is for you. What do you see when you think about the future of food? Okay. You can open your eyes again. Okay. I can imagine what's in your head is very different from one another. One might imagine that the future of food is not food at all, and we will substitute food and just eat a pill in the morning and then not have to eat food again. This is a very sad future, in my opinion, but that might be the future to some people. Other people might think that the future of food is very technological, that we will be able to edit genes and just create food, control our species totally, and create these future foods. Or might we even print the steak and we will be able to create meat in a lab? Or maybe it's all much easier than all of this, and it's much more similar to what we do every day in our kitchens. So since I don't want to give my opinion yet about what the future of food is going to look like, I will also use ChatGPT as an example of what he thinks, or she, about the future of food. So according to ChatGPT, the future of food is going to be sustainable. Merve this morning talked about prosperity instead of sustainability. It's going to be tech-driven, so it's going to have a lot of technology. There are going to be new proteins, so not only the animal proteins that we know nowadays, but a wide variety of proteins. And it's going to be functional and personalized. This is what ChatGPT thinks. Now, we created a program this year at my organization, and these were the 4 topics we were looking into. So I think ChatGPT got inspired in our work, and we started to look for solutions in the world from startups, people that were looking and creating solutions in the areas of digitalization, so tech solutions, new proteins, sustainability, and health and well-being. So it's very in line with what ChatGPT was saying. And today I want to share with you some very specific examples of companies that are putting forward solutions in these areas, solutions that are applicable to the food industry. I know you have different profiles. Some of you are chefs, some of you are industry leaders, some of you are experts, scientists, so you might have different interest in these solutions. But just for you to know that this exists. So we do have big challenges, but we already have solutions in the world, and we are working with these startups. So for example, food waste is a very big problem also in Turkey. There's a company that has developed a sticker to put on fruit and vegetable and extend shelf life much longer. So you see the mango on the picture. So instead of just lasting a couple of weeks, it can last up to months thanks to this sticker that spreads these natural ingredients, and extends its shelf life. Many, many more solutions regarding packaging, so packaging that comes from algae, for example, solutions to decarbonize the food industry. We will hear more and more in the upcoming years how carbon emissions are going to be a big deal, and we will have to deal with all of these issues. Also, technologies to work in agriculture. So how do we make that more intelligent? So for example, with machines that help us with picking. We are having a lot of trouble in countries such as Spain with labor. So people don't want to work anymore in farms. So how do we assist in that transition, especially with picking difficult types of foods like berries, you can imagine, are very difficult to handpick. Solutions in new proteins. Why new proteins if the proteins we have are very delicious? Today we ate a very delicious kebab. And why search for these new solutions? Well, we will have an increasing population, so we will need to search for more proteins to complement our diet, okay? And we are seeing these new proteins coming from algae, new types of eggs that don't come from a chicken, new kinds of meat that come from mushrooms. So a lot of opportunities in this new protein space. And lastly, it will be much more personalized to each one of us. Our lives are very different, and our activity levels and also our microbiome, so the bacteria that lives in our gut needs different types of nutrients, different types of food. So for example, Crown Biome is a company that has developed a device that you apply in your teeth, and they analyze your microbiome, so your nutritional needs, and they can suggest a specific diet for your specific needs. Okay, so all of this looks very futuristic, and you are thinking, why is this relevant in Turkey? Why do we need to do something about this? Well, our food system is completely broken. You have to think about why was the food system created. First of all, it was created to provide nutrition to people, and it was created using natural resources, right? We will see now some consequences of what our food industry is doing to the world and to people. I have to give you some very bad news. If we don't do anything about it, if we do not change our behavior and our design of the food system, we might not be able to eat some of these foods which we really, really love. In Turkey, for example, coffee is super important. Wine, I tasted yesterday some wines from Turkey, which are also delicious. We see here the chickpeas. So for example, to make hummus, we would have trouble to grow all of these food ingredients with the new climate conditions. So with the rising temperature, it will be more and more difficult to grow all of these foods. So this, for me, is enough of a motivation to work in the future of food, in creating that better food system, because I really want to be able to continue eating these foods. So we have, as you might have heard throughout the whole morning, a big impact in the environment, in the planet. Specifically, we are causing 70% biodiversity loss. This means that our land, for example, that was in the past creating a lot of diverse vegetables, that created a very rich cuisine, and it was very rich for the soil, it was very rich for our gut. Now it's based only in 12 vegetable species, so our diet only comes from 12 vegetables and 5 animals. And you can imagine that we have hundreds and thousands in the world. We are also creating more than 25% of greenhouse gas emissions through all of our activities. We use up 70% of fresh water, and you can think that there are people in the world, specifically 900 million people in the world, that do not have access to enough water, and we are losing the arable land and the topsoil, so where we will grow this food. And we also have terrible consequences, a terrible impact in people, in our health. This is not only an ethical issue, but this also costs a lot of money to the government. It's a very high public cost in public health, and it's also accounting for some of the main death-related diseases. So we are not being aligned with our initial purpose. The purpose of the food system is to feed people, and we are not doing it in a proper way. So in the beginning, I started with a question, and when you close your eyes, you might have thought of a future of food. So each one of you had a different idea of what that future of food was. We don't know what the future of food is going to be. The future does not exist, so we are creating it with our actions. The desired food future, so what I and our organization and the people I am working with, what we would like to see in that future is a system that uses less natural resources. So we see we cannot use so much water, land, energy, etc. So this new system that we are building has to use less natural resources. We have to produce more biodiversity, so different types of food. We have to reduce food waste by 50%. This is important in all parts of the world because currently we are throwing away 1/3 of everything we are producing. Can you imagine that in other industries, throwing away 1/3 of everything you have already produced? We have to reduce contamination of our soil, of our water. We have to reduce the amount of emissions we are generating. And lastly, we have to shift our mentality from maximizing productivity. So our food system in the past had to struggle with feeding enough calories to people so that people had enough calories at reach. But now we have to be obsessed with feeding with nutritious food. So not only feeding more, but also feeding better. So just a couple of conclusions on what the future food for me is. So the future food must be delicious. I think today we did not talk enough about flavor and taste. And before we said that content was the king. For me, flavor is the king. And if a product is not delicious, it doesn't matter if it's sustainable, if it's healthy, it will not work in the market. So it has to be tasty. Second of all, we must change production and distribution models with invisible innovation. This means that when the consumer looks to its plate, the food that he sees is not so different to what he's used to, because food is linked to identity, to memory, to heritage. So the consumer has to feel comfortable with what he is seeing on the plate. This is why we, as food industry, we have to put a lot of effort in integrating technologies throughout the whole value chain of food. So new ways of producing and distributing food, but maybe what we put on the plate is the same. It's traditional food. Third point, it must be accessible and convenient. So of course, these types of futuristic foods already exist, but not everyone can afford it. So in order to shift these impacts, we need many millions of people in the world to be eating in this new way. So we must really work hard and find investment to produce these foods, these good foods, in an affordable way. And lastly, it must improve livelihoods of those involved in the value chain of food. Farmers currently are some of the most food insecure people in the world. And this is crazy, that people who are growing our food do not have a good life. It is normal that we don't have future farmers, that people do not want to get into this very difficult business because they will not have a good livelihood. So we really have to work hard on shifting this. So this photo, I love. This is my grandma. When I close my eyes and I think about the future of food, this is the future I envision. If I think about those points, if the future has to be tasty, it has to have into consideration the livelihoods of people involved, it has to be sustainable, healthy, everything, it's just in the plate of my grandma. So I think it is very aligned with what you all are working in maintaining that heritage, that knowledge, that tradition, but in a more conscious way. So for me, that is the answer about the future of food. I hope that with all this data I share, you feel really empowered because you are working in the most important sector in the world. You are having the most impact in the economy, in people, in society, in everything, in our culture. So this is just some power for you to continue working hard in whatever you are doing. So thank you very much. Okay, and now I'd like to invite to the stage Matteo Vignoli, with whom I've worked for many, many years, so we will have a very interesting conversation. He has a very open view on how that future of food is, so I'm very glad we get to have this conversation. And I'd like to kickstart with a question around how do we make this better future good through food? So not a better future of food, but how, through our work, can we make a better world?
Thanks, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks to the organization. It was amazing to see such a crowd discussing about what I love, which is food and the future. And I would like to start with a story about this. The story comes from Thailand. A few years ago, we were going around the world to find food heroes, people that change the world with food in their local ecosystem. And I find this hotel, okay, in the outskirts of Bangkok. It's called Sampran. And it's a very high-end hotel. And for sure, he's doing his business and creating, a good experience for their customer. But he also decided that he couldn't stand that in the area of the hotel, farmers could not, live a good life. And also, he was giving great experience to his customer, but food was coming from everywhere. He didn't, care about what farmers were doing. So he was frustrated that it was like an asteroid. It was like something was coming from Mars into a land where people were starving and were, not living the life they could. So he decided to change that. And that's the first thing, right? Decision. At a certain point, you can decide that you do not stand the current system. And that is before action, right? It's before doing things. And what he did was saying, okay, if I want to offer a better experience to my customer, I have to have, a surrounding that stands to this point, okay? So I cannot have poverty around, people that are starving. My customers should be involved in an ecosystem that is thriving. So he invited to the hotel all the farmers and said, I think we all should work together. I'm going to buy the food from you if you transition to organic farming. And I'm going to buy the food from you if we agree on what food is needed from my customer, and if we find a way to not have pesticides in the area of my hotel, because I think that that's good for us, and it's also good for my customers. And initially, farmers were uneasy, because it was hard for them to change the way they used to do. But he said, I'm going to commit to buy from, at least 5 years to what you produce. And the first farmer said, okay, let's talk about it. And you know that some type of agriculture is designed for countries that have very little farming. Thailand has 30% farmers, so they were using, chemicals to reduce workload, but in fact was not needed because they had workload and workforce to employ. So in a few months, they started to find a model so that the hotel was becoming the center of a community of farmers that would, produce for the hotel, and then, sell to the customer. So every Friday, there was a farmer's market in the front of the hotel. People were coming and were buying the food that was produced, and they had already tested into the hotel. It was delicious. It was not perfect. It was imperfectly perfect because, the story was this food was grown here. And then customer wanted to go visit the farm. And it was so interesting to them that people were dedicating their life and were, a community was not going to a hotel anymore, was going to a family. Farmers were coming in the morning to bring the produce. They could see, what was happening, and then, understand why this produce was actually, coming to their plate, and it was like an experience for them. Okay, and then they said, okay, but we don't want to waste these kind of things, so they started to make also other values out of the produce. They were basically, creating cosmetics. They were creating soap and other byproduct. They created, jam and juice, and it was really a thriving community. And this juice was not produced only at the hotel, even though they made the investment. So there was the lab also, was also produced in the farm and brought to the hotel. And then farmers started to appreciate that this model was actually creating a better system. So that's an example of how you can use food to change the world. And not to change only your business, but also change the business of all the people that are around you. And I think that this for me was an insight, was really a way to see that is possible. That wherever place we are in the food chain, we can really make this decision to change our perspective and really stand to the commitment that we feel. And I've seen some people downstairs that they really live this. They do the product with local ingredients. They stand for their communities, and they use food to go beyond, just value and money. They use food to do prosperity, and they use food to go beyond sustainability, to regenerate the local community. Because in 5 years, what happened is that organic farming was not a privilege. They were not producing only for others. They were so capable of getting value out of also the waste, the sub-product. They learn how to use, things to then regenerate the land. That after 5 years there was no pesticides. Insects started to flow back. They were using, all the sub-product to then sell to other farmers and other industry, and this became a model that other hotels applied. So this is a transition that I think we should all aim, and it's not something that comes from somebody else. It's something that comes from us as players of this ecosystem, and I see that happening all over the world. We see that in Politica, where we have our, let's say, headquarters for the Mediterranean diet. Maybe that's another question.
No, it was a very complete answer with many, many layers to it. Something important is to create the demand for these good regenerative products. As you said, when the owner of the hotel committed to buying that produce of farmers, then farmers got the incentive to transition into organic farming. Because otherwise, there's not going to be that first step from most of the farmers if they are only going to be demanded for certain types of crops, right? I love an example from the company Patagonia. You might have seen the Aperol company. They have Patagonia Provisions, which is a branch devoted to food. And they are acquiring and supporting entrepreneurs doing regenerative food and food with positive impact. So they have created a beer called the Long Root Ale, and this beer, instead of using wheat, because wheat really destroys the soil many times, they are using kernza, which is a new type of, well, another type, not a new type, it's an old type of cereal, and it has very long roots, and with these long roots it helps the soil capture all the nitrogen, and it helps in that soil regeneration. So they are creating like a whole supply chain that makes sense, and they are communicating to the final consumer that this regenerative product has long roots so that the consumer questions himself. So we have to work on a supply chain basis. Of course, it's first a decision someone individually has to make, but then we have to work as a whole. So maybe I think it would make sense to go to the question around how do we build that ecosystem, because we as individuals, we cannot create this monumental shift in the world. So we need to create ecosystems, we need to work together. Matteo always says a sentence that is, innovation is a cooperative effort. So I would like to know, how have you been building through Future Food this ecosystem to create that joint effort in the whole world?
It's difficult. It's difficult because it's difficult to change ourselves, think about changing others. But when I say that innovation is a cooperative effort, I say that because sometimes people think they have to collaborate, okay? They have to work with others, which is good, okay? It's good to work with others. But collaboration means sharing means. So I do one thing, you do another, but we cannot stand on each own, okay? Cooperation has a different meaning, means sharing ends, sharing why. You know, before we were saying that we need to start with why, and also in this cooperation, you need to start with why. You really need to understand and share with all your, you know, supply chain, with customers and suppliers, why that's important. And goes beyond making money, which is something that everybody has to. So it goes beyond that. It goes to generation, it goes to our children, it goes to having a future, building a future. So this kind of discourse connects people. And this is the first thing that you need to do when you want to build an ecosystem. Talk to the other people and find their whys and align that. And that's the first point. And we were working in different parts of the world, but after the pandemic, we decided to focus on a specific case, which is a little village in the south of Italy that had what we call dormant resource. And a dormant resource is a resource that it's there, but it's not seen, okay? It's not used. In this case, that small village is very important because it's the place in the world where people live longer, okay? that means that in that small village there are, a lot of people that are more than 100 years. And I was not the one discovering. It was two, American researchers, which are called Margaret and Ansel Keys, that went to this village to understand why those people were living so long. And the reason was their way of life, okay? And those two researchers called that way of life Mediterranean diet, okay? So when I say that this village was a resource for the world, was not seen, I mean that nobody knew it, okay? We all speak about the Mediterranean life, we are all in the Mediterranean, we all use the same principle, but we didn't know where, at least I, where those things were coming from and what was the Mediterranean way. So we went there and we used this resource that we all have at our disposal to ensure that the community could thrive again. So we studied the regenerative practice that the people are doing. We understood how people were using nature to sustain their life, and we started to invite other people from around the world to come to this let's say space to discuss about what it takes to build an ecosystem. And to build an ecosystem, you really need to find the motivation and to give an opportunity to design a future which is shared. It's not I want to do something, but it's we, okay? What can we do to live, longer? Which is a fair question, right, to ask. We all want to enjoy our life in this planet, and living longer, it's a good motivation for many people. And so we started with what we call the algorithm for longevity, which is a way that we all share in our countries to leverage what are the resources that we have close and source from them so that we can build our own society. So this is in essence the second step of building the ecosystem, which is giving the vision of what we want to do. And the third is action. Because if you have a reason, you have a community, then you can act. And acting means that you can start taking the resources of this community, and I'm talking about, in that case, of beautiful produce like I've seen today, and Turkey is full of that, and have those products known by the other people around. So through this community, you can really bring your legacy, your food products, the good ones, known by other people, so that those can be lifted up and could be appreciated by many people. And this is the third level, because if you want to build an ecosystem, you need to build this kind of prosperity for the people that are working to make the ecosystem possible. And the connection that you create by doing that are enormous, because you can have, and measure the impact that you're doing in those communities by sharing the food, which is what we do as human beings all the time. So building an ecosystem means that we all work together toward this end, and we create for our future generation the ability to prosper in all the parts of the world. We knew we were on the right path, because in this community that was made of people that are more than 100 years, we had young people coming back, which is like a flashlight, in the night. Around the world we have places that are abandoned by young people that want to go to more fancy places or cities, and this is like not taking care of our heritage. And having those people coming back to take care of these communities and thrive is, for me, a hope for all the communities that are, let's say, not thriving around the world, and there are many. As of now, most people do not yet live in cities, and I'm not sure that this is going to be, you know, a good future for us. I think that we need to maintain a balance between, you know, cities and farmland, because this is a good balance for, you know, a planet that is not so concentrated that creates, you know, massive destruction. So this ecosystem doesn't have to be only in one place, but has to connect all those communities around the world. So if you check the emblematic community of UNESCO, which are also in Turkey, you see that those communities are speaking and are connecting with each other to share good practices and ensure that the future of food that we are creating is a future that is just and also shared among all human beings. And I'm saying that because sometimes people say that by 2050 we will be 70% of the people will be living in cities. But if we abandon the farmland, there's not going to be cities because we cannot sustain the critical mass that cities have. So we also need to find a model for rural and local communities to thrive.
Absolutely, and I believe it's a global issue, and everyone is now having problems to source that labor, and moreover, we are having problems to understand the value of food, and that is one of the main reasons why we are wasting so much food, why we are eating the way we are eating. Everything is related to the fact that we don't know how food is grown, where it comes from, and we have lost that connection. I really admire the ecosystem Future Food has created, and it is very aspirational, and you need to get some perspective and be capable of some abstraction to see how, like those examples you just mentioned, for example the farm in Thailand or the example of the community in Polica, how is that scalable at a wider level? That is the hard step now.
I must say that our latest experiment was in Tokyo. So we went to an area of Tokyo, and we understood that sometimes the food desert is in the middle of the countryside, but we also have food desert in the middle of cities, like places where it's easier to find junk food than a salad. And the fact that you can recreate the community to regenerate also cities, it's for me, one level of scale up of this model. So finding the local resources that take care and, through food, care about the place, it's something that it's important also in cities. We have now another asset on our, let's say, toolkit, which is technology. And we should use technology wisely to make that happen. For example, we are using now artificial intelligence to, let's say, advise us on things, so to support decision making. I think that there is a potential to use those technology to change the food system. For example, we could say, okay, what should I eat tomorrow to ChatGPT? But that's a silly question. But we can ask, to use the power of computation that is behind artificial intelligence, maybe to optimize recipes, to waste less food, to understand how much a crowd like this would really eat, so that when we operate a business, instead of producing roughly something because based on experience we think that that's what people will eat, we know exactly what people will eat because we will have data and computational algorithm to optimize the recipes for exactly what is going to be eaten. So this is an unprecedented, we never had such a tool. We were leveraging mainly on our, basic or advanced experience, but the data that you have can be put at use so that you can better your operation at a level that you reduce the waste. Or also you can say, okay, I have these things in my fridge, what can I do to actually save this food? And having those kind of solution at your fingertip might lead us to use technology in a totally different way. Sometimes we think that technology is something that is attached to us. But no, technology is something that changes our way of thinking. So when we have those kind of technology and we apply to food, we'll have new food, so an innovation which is as good as the one that we had before. And we've been doing that forever because innovation and tradition are the same thing. We are not eating the same hummus that our grandparents were eating because we have different ingredients. But we are able to make it even better because maybe it's sustainable and just and it's not wasted. So this link, I think it's really important, and the solution you were showing, some of them will go in this direction.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to remember that technology and innovation doesn't always have to be digital, because it's sometimes scary or costly, and companies, or especially small companies, they are afraid of incorporating such technologies. And I believe that an innovation such as regeneration, so growing food as we were doing it hundreds of years ago, might be an innovation we have to take back from the past. So a lot of the changes I would like to see in the future come from past knowledge. What other innovations would you like to highlight, if there are others that you think will be especially game-changing for the food industry?
I think that the first one is all the technology that is going towards understanding better our customers, because that's a pull on the food industry. And this is, in the digital space, but it's a different way to relate to our customer or consumers. So things like, understanding what is good for each individual, I think it's giving us opportunities to change the whole food chain, to serve better each individual. Second, I think that all the new knowledge that we are generating through fermentation, it's really interesting, because it's generating a new understanding of how we can preserve food, but also generate wealth and health output with the fact that we are processing food which is alive, and it's really can make better self with probiotics and better understanding of how we keep alive the food that we eat. And then I think that also the stream in robotics and help to farming is really interesting. We now have sensors that can detect water in the ground and really use those knowledge to give water where it's really needed, and not spray water randomly, because we might have issues in having the water. So having the water only where the plants need it is really key. So it goes in precision agriculture, but I feel that this kind of tools are really something that we will see much more into our fields.
Absolutely. So just one last question to wrap up. What is your future food? What would you see on your dish?
I think that food hasn't changed much in the past centuries. So I agree with you that the future of food will look like as it was in the past. And it's just that we will know that is going to do better to us, and we know it by certainty. So we'll be even more happy when we will eat.
When we eat the kebab.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much.